Hello, everyone. Welcome to GPIC 2021. After 2 days of great exchanges where we all wanted to bring solutions to more capital flowing into investments in climate change, I am honored to introduce the final closing session. Moderated by GCF's Executive Director, Javier, and invited with distinguished guests from the World Tourism Organization. We have the Secretary General, Surab Puleleshvili, and we also have the pleasure of having the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Panama, Erika Munez. Both of our guests have had an extensive career in both the public and private sectors. They are trying to bring solutions from their own fields, both in policy and in global tourism, in order to bring the idea of sustainability across the different activities that they undertake. We also want to take this opportunity for this closing event to do the segue from our exchanges into what's coming in COP26 in Glasgow. With further ado, I give the floor to Mr. Javier Manzanares, Executive Director, Deputy Executive Director of GCF. Javier, over to you. Thank you.
Yes, many thanks, Henry. Dear Mr. Surab Puleleshvili, Secretary General of UNWTO, dear Ms. Erika Munez, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Panama, and dear participants, colleagues, and friends from around the world. We are now reaching the end of the 4th annual GCF Private Investment for Climate Conference, GPIC. And it is my privilege and an honor to bid farewell to what has been an extremely stimulating and insightful discussion over 2 days. GPIC has gathered more than 3,000 participants from both the public and private sector. This has included project developers, institutional investors, financial institutions, and public policy leaders. The live recordings of all of our discussions are being uploaded to the GPIC website, where they can be accessed for the next 90 days. Now, in its 4th consecutive year, the conference put emphasis on key elements of the GCF forthcoming private sector strategy to help mobilize private climate finance in critical areas, including adaptation, ecosystems-based solutions, and innovative technologies. As Henry indicated before, this is a timely forerunner to the 2021 UN Climate Change Conference, COP26. I hope this event provides a fruitful platform to strengthen public-private partnerships and accelerate private sector-driven climate action in developing countries. Also, as was mentioned by Yannick in his opening remarks, irony is at the heart of climate finance, colleagues. On the one hand, trillions of dollars are earning negative interest rates in many OECD countries. On the other hand, low carbon climate resilient investment opportunities could yield a direct economic gain of US $26 trillion through 2030. The channeling of private climate finance at scale towards such investment opportunities in developing countries, and particularly for the least developed countries, LDCs, or the small island developing states, SIDS, and adaptation. This is constrained by a number of barriers. Distinguished audience, there is no smooth road to a greener future. While climate investments have been increasing during the past decades, they are still wide short of the mark that is needed to reach the Paris Agreement emission and reductions adaptation goals. This year's conference provides a platform for business, finance, and technology leaders to share experiences, innovations, and best practices for reinforcing and scaling up public-private partnerships. And this is to ensure that developing countries can access adequate finance in the face of the twin challenges of COVID-19 and climate change. actions to remove barriers hindering the flow of global finance to reach where they are most needed to fund developing country climate action are highlighted in GCF's forthcoming private sector strategy. And this is based on 4 pillars: promoting a conducive investment environment, number 1. Number 2, accelerating innovation for climate technologies. Number 3, de-risking market creating projects, so to establish a commercial track record. And number 4, strengthening domestic financial systems and institutions to scale up private climate finance. So on the basis of these 4 pillars, we have held 7 sessions. And this is a very brief summary of the sessions. It's a 1 sentence. On day 1, high-level opening dialogue. This was about promoting a conducive investment environment to unlock private finance for low-carbon, climate-resilient development. This high-level opening dialogue brought together the presidents of Costa Rica, Gabon, as well as Public of Gabon Minister and 2 private sector leaders. The executive director of the Green Climate Fund, Yannick Lemaric, opened the floor to the panelists by first highlighting how the removal of barriers that hinder global finance flows to developing countries could solve the climate finance paradox by unleashing $26 trillion in new climate investments by 2030. The president of Costa Rica, Mr. Carlos Alvarado Quesada, emphasized that most of the solutions are in developing countries and pointed out the urgent need to close the missing link based on perceptions of final risk in climate investments. The president of Gabon, Mr. Ali Bongo Ondimba, and the minister, Professor Lee White from Gabon, were emphasized that Gabon is one of the very few countries that remain carbon positive and the first country, African country, to receive payments for reducing carbon emissions under the CAFI, the multi-donor UN-hosted Central African Forest Initiative. We also invited Ms. Jacqueline Novogratz, CEO of Acumen, and Ms. Joan Larrea, CEO of Convergence. Jacqueline highlighted the crucial needs to access strategic public finances, such as those provided by GCF. John Larrea said that the use of blended finance is crucial in generating catalytic capital that draws on public or philanthropic sources to increase private sector investment in sustainable development. That was session 1. Session 2, it was about accelerating innovation for climate technologies, financing instruments and business model. This session brought out the key issues, solutions and lessons learned to bring more innovation into climate actions projects. Several business models were discussed. The panel also provided some insights on the challenging estimations of startups' future climate mitigation and adaptation impacts. Session number 3 was about deep dive supporting innovative adaptation technologies and ecosystem-based approaches and services. There was indeed an active discussion with the panelists that adaptation in climate finance continues to be a critical area, with an estimated need for 75% of adaptation finance that has to come from the private sector. Session number 4, it was about partnering successfully with the GCF, real cases. And this was an interview with Jacqueline Novogratz, Acumen CEO. This was a format of a fireside chat of this session that put in the spotlight the successful partnership between GCF and Acumen. Jacqueline emphasized the advantages of working with the GCF, namely credibility and support from the Secretariat, as well as value-aligned partnerships. On session number 5 of day 2, we touch upon unlocking markets to crowd in private finance for climate projects. This was indeed a vivid, active discussion around practical solutions to crowd in private sector investments in climate change, overcoming existing barriers. And finally, on the last two sessions, session number 6 and number 7, strengthening domestic financial systems and institutions to scale up private finance, as well as session number 7, was a deep dive, increasing private sector investments in LDCs and SITs. Our panelists also reinforced the need for strengthening domestic financial systems and an increased focus on investments in LDCs and SITs to build resilience of vulnerable communities. Dear Secretary General of UNWTO, dear Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Panama, I would like now to dedicate a few minutes of this closing session to please hear your reactions to our GPIC 2021 general outcomes, and particularly on the importance of public funds to both the Republic of Panama as well as for the WTO. So at this point, I would like to start with you, Secretary General, if you allow me, and to hear your reactions from the perspective of the UNWTO. So the floor is yours, please.
Gracias, Javier. Encantado saludarles. Querida ministra Erika Moyenes, the estimated colleagues, to save time, I ask that you consider all protocols observed. And thank you for inviting me to contribute to this important discussion. This is a critical time for global tourism. I had a chance to discuss it with Javier here in our office, and we are very closely collaborating with the government of Panama. We had excellent meeting twice with the minister, and best regards to your colleague, dear minister, to Ivan Atkinson, very good friend of mine. The sector represents 7% of world GDP, supports 1 in 10 jobs. I don't want to talk about tourism, how important it is and how blocked, unfortunately, last 2 years because of COVID worldwide, and was the third biggest export earning category in 2019. However, pandemic has hit us very hard, and a loss of $4 trillion in global GDP for the years 2020 and 2021. This is the estimate cost of the massive fall in international arrivals, according to a joint report from UNWTO and UNCTAD. People, families, and communities suffer this impact, and which has also put more than 100 million jobs at risk. This is estimate calculation, of course, but there we are. I mean, 100 million jobs, it's quite big numbers, talking about the industry and even families who are waiting still tourists. But at the same time, this impact reflects the power of tourism to contribute to socio-economic growth. In recent months, we have seen tourism restarting in many parts of the world. Our organization supports tourism, rapid and sustainable recovery for both societies and economies. We are working towards resuming safe international mobility while shaping a more resilient, sustainable, and inclusive tourism sector in the long term. The impact of travel restrictions on international travel during COVID-19 has led a drop in tourist emissions. Nevertheless, emissions could rapidly rebound once tourism really restarts. Transport-related CO2 emissions in tourism were responsible for 5% of all global emissions in 2016. Because of the huge multiplier effect of tourism in other sectors of our global economy, a broad and globally consistent approach is needed, all in line with the targets of the Paris Agreement. The Glasgow Declaration, which we will launch with our partners at COP26 next month, reflects all of this. And again, I want to thank Government of Panama to support that initiative, and I'm very happy that His Excellency President, he will attend the Glasgow COP, and again, leadership of government of Panama, it's very appreciated and very timely and very important for us and for tourism. The Glasgow Declaration is a commitment to a decade of tourism climate action. Its aim is to be a catalyst and accelerator climate actions in tourism. It calls on every part of our sector for two critical commitments. First, to cutting carbon emissions by at least half over the next decade. And second, to reach net zero emissions as soon as possible before 2050, which is critical time. I mean, sometimes it hurts and it looks very difficult to say something what will happen in 2050, but estimations and forecasts are quite hard, as I would say, than COVID effect today in 2 months. So the ambition is there. So two is the determination. But the transformation of tourism needs the right financial support and economic incentives. In the past 18 months, the UNWTO has seen a significant fall in tourism investment. Data suggests that global foreign direct investments into tourism fell by almost 75% in 2020, compared to that of 2019, while venture capital investments remained constant in 2020 compared to 2019 in the travel, tech, and mobility sector. Green investments. Green investments in nature-based solutions generate rates of return on government spending of between $6 to $28 for every public dollar invested. According to the World Bank, because tourism value chain and ecosystem triggers direct and indirect economic impacts in local economies. We face a double challenge: to rebuild investment levels and to accelerate the green transformation of tourism. Green recovery needs to benefit people first, and the tourism can lead the change by advancing climate action while providing livelihoods and prosperity to all. Again, our organization, powered by the voice of member states, need to rethink and recreate a new common agenda for tourism. Everything changed, mentality of tourists changed, the way to greet and to say goodbye changed. I mean, everything absolutely ages and groups of travelers change, destinations. I mean, we're talking about very big changes in industry itself, and that's why we have to rethink and to think how to follow these changes, because we need to be more focused and more closer to each other. How can we achieve the transformation towards inclusive societies and prosperous economies while preserving the earth that sustain us? This is the question. This is the reason why I'm addressing you today and the key institution for climate finance. And I'm very happy to starting this long way with you. We need the global community to support and finance climate action to sustain and scale up our vision for making this new journey possible. UNWTO is already a carbon neutral organization, I can say. Net zero tourism will require all hands on deck with new climate policies and new business models. From nature-based solutions to the circular economy, as well as resource efficiency and innovation powered by research and development. But the most important thing will be financing to unlock tourism potential towards net zero emissions. I'm working towards the creation of a UN net zero tourism fund. This would support the necessary adoption and mitigation I have outlined while reducing the risk associated with the innovative investment flows. It is a model which would be fueled by a diverse range of seed investors, This would include tourists themselves, of course. It would also include tourism businesses, destinations, multilateral and bilateral donors, and carbon traders. It will build a sharing climate economy for tourism, a model which will catalyze and scale up the potential of blended finance, concessional loans, venture capital, and equity. I will also embrace the growing carbon market ecosystem. Achieving this, it will require a strong alliance of all key actors of the climate scene of today, alongside new disruptive financing models. Without doubt, the Green Climate Fund represents the best ally to kick-start this journey. I want to remember and remind you that in 2019, we had 1.5 billion international arrivals worldwide. We want to involve these people one by one to be part of this project. This is the main goal and main focus for all of us. And in Barcelona next week, we will have quite interesting discussion, and I'm sure that with our member states we will present our plan, and we are working very fast. Thanks to you. You are very fast, encouraging us, and again, many thanks to be part of big family, which can do a lot of things, and I hope that can change the planet, at least to start, and then to leave this legacy to tourism sector and to planet and to nature and to the world. Many thanks for your attention, and hope to see you personally very soon.
Many thanks, Secretary General. Many thanks, Surab. Indeed, very powerful messages. Global action, 1.5 billion people that do use tourism all throughout the year. Also, a good invitation to all of the actors that are participating in our GPIC. It resonates indeed with the GCF mandate. And we do have some investments nowadays already, or better said, funding proposals that have been approved and that they do tackle tourism as a sustainable tourism. Having said that, I'm going to move now with Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Panama, Erika Moens. The floor is yours in asking you for reactions also to the outcomes of our GPIC GCF private sector conference. Ms. Minister, Ms. Erika, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. And thank you for the introduction. And thank you, Mr. Surab, for your partnership and your support. I think that it couldn't be more timely to be part of this conference and in the closing, because as we hear the ideas and how to mobilize funding, it is absolutely crucial as we're coming out of the pandemic. Every single government throughout the world, we're all doing the same. We're trying as fast as we can to get back on our feet and to recover. And we need to put at the top of the priority to make sure that it's done in a sustainable manner. If you don't do it, you go through perhaps more cost efficient, but less sustainable options. So in order to make sure that the priorities are where we all need as a planet, we need to make sure that the funding is there. So this conference certainly is timely, and the focus, particularly when we talk about tourism and other areas, that we need to make sure ones of the worst that have been the hardest hit with the pandemic. I am here speaking and hopefully showcases the commitment of our government. We're, I think, relatively new to this space. Panama has been known in the past for other fields, but as of now, I represent the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It is a top priority. It is also a top priority in the environment ministry. It is also a top priority for the president, and it's a top priority for the tourism ministry. So we're all aligned within Panama, and I think we are because not just because it sounds good, but I think we've understood well that it is good for the economy. The more that you have sustainable options and as you develop, it becomes good business. And that is a self-awareness that has, I think, been crucial and in the transformation. And I say that in spite of Panama having the base for as long as we can remember, we have one of the main waterways of the world. And that meant that 30% of our country has been, the forest has been already protected for over 100 years. So that, in addition with our recent enactment of 30% of our oceans, puts us as the leader of our forefront within our region and in the planet. There are 3 countries in the world that are carbon negative: Suriname, Bhutan, and Panama, that are certified carbon negative. And if you look and you think about Bhutan and Panama or Suriname, we're nothing alike. None of the 3 of these countries are alike. But considering different economies, different geographies, different focus, but that we all are able to make sure that our forests capture more carbon dioxide than the one that we emit as a country, is certainly very interesting. And also it helps us see where we should be aiming in terms of our development on our policy. So part of what we did during the pandemic, we couldn't go out and look into investment and all the projects that we were trying to develop, but we did use the time wisely to prepare the groundwork. And that meant from the legal framework and making sure that the incentives are there to the actual projects, because sometimes I think all of us as government have wonderful ideas, and when they come into actual practice, they're not feasible. There's no appetite within the banking industry. So actually making sure that every single project is truly from A to Z completely considered. We looked also, as you were discussing, what are some of the incentives, and for sure blended finance, and making sure that even some government funding is the catalyst to attract that private investment that we desperately need, was also put into place. So I think that we've used the time wisely, and now conferences like this allow us to showcase all those projects and why it is not that sounds well, but we've understood. And when I say we understood, I go even as far as to say that the environment here is not protected just by the government right now. In Panama, every time that there's somebody trying to take out or deforest without a permit or illegal fishing, the first one to ring the phone and to call the authorities are the same Panamanians, because I think that this transformation into awareness that you shouldn't be doing this because it will affect me at some point has been critical and also very interesting. And when you make sure that all those, the awareness and where you want to go as a government, I would say that the second line of what we're trying to go in addition to sustainable development is gender parity. I am one, there are 4 Minister of Foreign Affairs that are women in the continent. There are 35 countries, I'm one of 4. And I'm just one example of the many, the gender parity is throughout our agenda. And one area that is particularly important is when you talk about sustainable tourism. The entrepreneurs, more than 50% are women. So when you're trying to develop and to actually create sustainable growth in rural areas, it is really women, the one that take on these opportunities and that are able to develop. So it fits in nicely with the policy that we're trying to develop. And at the end, we need to make sure that we're showcased in the proper manner. And we have, we think, the right equation. Low risk, our sovereign risk. When we went in the midst of the pandemic, we were one of the first countries within Latin America that went into the markets to get more debt. We were oversubscribed. Our bond issuance was oversubscribed because of the appetite within the market that was there for us. The incentives, I think, that are there, and also from a public policy perspective to make sure that everybody is aligned, and this is from the bottoms up. Where you want to see yourself. And again, as I say, we're new to this, but we are going full on and strong and understanding that this is the way that we, as we recover from the pandemic, and we're doing that swiftly. I think we have, for instance, The hub of the Americas, Copa, one of the main airlines, has its headquarters in Panama. And we were just looking at the numbers yesterday, and it has managed to recover nicely from what was the worst of the pandemic to now, and it has gone beyond what we thought it would be for this moment. And the area that we need to make sure and attract properly is tourism. So that investment and those projects that we are prepared and that we're now ready to showcase, one particular area that we're looking to do that will be, of course, at the COP26. At the COP26, we go from the public policy and diplomacy aspect, and I will give you two examples. From a foreign policy perspective, because we were able to enact the 30% protection of our oceans, that's a wonderful contribution to the planet, but it is limited because it's the Panamanian Oceans, or the corridor that goes through the Pacific side. But if we're able to include Costa Rica, Colombia, and Ecuador, it becomes this massive corridor that is fully protected, and this biodiversity corridor that would make sure that it's actually a true gift for the planet, as the ocean always remains the biggest carbon sink in the world. And we sometimes focus only in the forest and we forget about that very important ocean. So from a foreign policy perspective, we're trying to support those other governments so that by the COP26, we're able to deliver as a true and concrete result this protection of all four countries. And you would have, anything from the Galapagos and Ecuador to the Costa Rica, Panama. So that's one area where we're trying actively to make sure from a foreign policy perspective. But we also have all these projects that we've developed and will be showcasing at private events to make sure that what we've worked hard in order to make sure that they are crystallized, that the financing is there and available for them to access. And that I think that that's key, because ultimately, I started by saying Panama is one of the 3 countries carbon negative, but I can also say that we don't have a lot of funding from green funding, if you may. So you have on one side, one country that is doing more than its part worldwide, and then one that is deeply affected by climate change. And one example, as simple, and that you have the numbers, is the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal right now is incurring in a massive billion-dollar project of water resources management because of the global warming and droughts, rainfall, etc., that has affected its operation. So we went from the Paris Agreement, where there was a lot of commitment in terms of funding for countries such as Panama that were doing their part, and that hasn't really materialized. So we'll be looking aggressively to showcase what we're doing and to hopefully mobilize those resources. So we're grateful to be part of here. We think that it's absolutely timely to have this kind of conference, particularly as we're all coming out of the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. Thank you, Erica. Excellent intervention. I feel extremely honored, privileged to have you both in this panel. And if I may also capture a few of your messages, I'll be particularly impressed about the link that you have made between sustainable tourism and gender, whereas 50% of the tourism entrepreneurs on sustainability, those are women. If I may add the third element that I know it's also very relevant to Panama and many other countries, is the indigenous people as part of the same pivotal important areas. Take note clearly, Panama being the carbon negative, congratulate you on enacting the 30% protection of oceans. And we are also at the GCF very keen in supporting blue economy and oceans, as we have demonstrated in recent board decisions. So again, very many thanks of both of you. Excellent words, excellent messages, very powerful, very good for the context of our private sector conference. And now, finally, dear participants, colleagues, and friends, on behalf of the Green Climate Fund, I would like to express gratitude to all, to their excellencies and ministers, heads of international organizations, business leaders, of national and global finance institutions. Our gratitude to GCF partners and climate thought leaders, and all other speakers and panel members. Your presence truly has been invaluable, and without any doubts has helped make this year's conference a great success. We're also thankful to all of those who have been involved in organizing this event, and particularly my colleagues from GCF Private Sector Facility, Henry, the Events Management Unit team, the IT staff, as well as the partnership and communication teams. Colleagues, your work has been outstanding, and your time and effort in organizing this conference, despite the difficult circumstances this year, is much, much appreciated. During the past 2 days of discussion, it has become evident, as our distinguished panelists have made very clear point, that there is a great potential for GCF as a concessional finance provider. And this is to partner with the private sector in raising climate ambition and realizing climate action in developing countries. It is clear that we can do much more. We hope this conference has contributed to a deeper understanding between the GCF and the private sector. As we have seen in examples of approved projects, namely Acumen on Resilient Agriculture Fund, also Global Funds for Coral Reefs, so on and so forth. A closer collaboration between the GCF and private sector could achieve breakthrough beyond current boundaries in building new climate markets, whilst also steering financial resources to the most climate vulnerable. Dear participants, colleagues, and friends, the GCF Private Investment for Climate Conference is an annual event. And this is also an annual call to action in climate change, where the GCF's mandate is to de-risk open markets, realize opportunities for climate action and investments. This is a yearly reminder, I must say, that we all need to raise ambitions and empower actions. We look forward to seeing you again in 2022. Thank you very much, and over to you, Henry.
Thank you very much, Javier. I think you said it extremely succinctly and very clear that there is a call to action. And I think the minister and also the Secretary General pointed that the next action where we're all going to meet is COP26. And I think that is indeed an opportunity to realize a lot of the things we've discussed. And with that, I would like to close this successful GPIC conference and also thank everyone engaged, especially those that joined us. We had over 3,000 people registered, and throughout the different sessions, we got great participation. Thank you very much. Stay safe, healthy, and keep contributing to a world that has sustainability at the core. Thank you very much.